become my friend if you assist my happiness. And I will not like you if you don't assist my happiness. Unless you're a dentist and you help me to have good teeth in the future, right? If you harm my long-term happiness, my short-term happiness, in order to give me long-term happiness, okay, you're someone I feel I like, and someone I whose assistance or attendance I seek. But if you destroy my short-term happiness and even my long-term, no, I don't like it. So, therefore, this is selfishness. From a correct perception of I, you go to an exaggerated selfishness, right? Exaggerated. Now let's take anger. Let's take aversion, anger, hatred, right? And when I use the word anger, anger is like a blanket term, which includes, it's just for the sake of keeping it easy. I can say round table and elongated table and big table and three-leg table, but I use the word table as a general term. The same we do with anger. Anger can mean resentment, it can mean aversion, it can mean hatred. It's a blanket term. There are different degrees and different forms of anger, but just for the sake of simplicity here, there's a certain type of anger described in Buddhism that's seen as negative. Now, what is the positive version of anger? What is the positive version? Well, the positive version would be, let's say you have John and Jane. Okay? Now, John does an action that harms Jane. Okay? Out of anger, John is angry with Jane and he hits her. John is angry with Jane and he hits Jane. Okay. So I call the action of John, I call John's action negative. Okay. I have compassion for Jane because Jane is being harmed. I actually also have compassion for John if it's still rooted in reality. I also feel I have compassion for John. I'm concerned with John because he's doing something to harm himself. He harms Jane, but he also harms himself. So therefore, I have compassion. Okay. So this is when things are actually in accordance with reality. It makes sense. Then my mind starts exaggerating. It turns into anger directed at John. How does that happen? Well, John is merely imputed on the John is merely imputed on the basis of his mind or body, or on the basis of the actions of mind and body, right? So when John harms Jane, right? When John does something there's an activity, an action that John engages in. But that's not everything about John, is it? Right? The activity of harming Jane, that is just one activity he engages in. I impute many different activities. Maybe saving a dog, I also impute that on the basis of John. But in that moment, when I'm angry with John, what happens? How does the anger arise? Suddenly the activity, the action of John and John become one. I can no longer differentiate between that activity of harming and John. Just suddenly John and that activity become one. And the negative action, it becomes big and much bigger, so big that I can no longer see the positive qualities of John. When my anger was there, when there's real anger, I only see that negative action of John, and John has become one with that action. And instead of wanting to harm the action, I want to harm John. There seems to be a different John, different from mind and body, and I want to punch him. I want to hurt him. So you see, initially it started off with, I impute John on the basis of this action. But it's not really the action. I don't separate. I blow it up, and now I'm angry with John. Right? So what is initially gave me room for compassion for both Jane and John, and stopping John, maybe with assertiveness, right? It's out of compassion, but with assertiveness, because telling him, please stop, will not help. So with assertiveness, I may hold him, I may catch him like that, I may take him to the police to stop him from harming Jane and to stop him from harming him, and do it out of compassion. Now I do it out of anger. And it's bound to be exaggerated. I punch him a little more than it's necessary, right? Kick him in the back a little bit, do whatever I can to. So it's an exaggerated action that goes beyond what I want to actually reach. Okay, what I would actually, if I'm not angry, like to do. Stop John, help Jane. Right? So this is where the anger from just perceiving something as negative, I labeled negative on the basis of harming John and Jane. It becomes as if in and of itself this whole person is negative. I don't see anything more, and I punch him. Guilt is another good example. I think guilt, and what I usually say is our century is the century of the self. Okay? Our sense of self is very, very strong because it is made strong by modern media, by the whole commercial thing. Be someone, be different. Right? There's a lot of emphasis on I. Not so much on we, as much there's on I. So therefore we have an added sense of I need to be. There's also a lot of emphasis, I need to be perfect. That's terrible. That's a terrible word, perfect. Right? Because there is no perfect. It's impossible. We're trying to be something that is impossible. It's like saying fly. Just fly. It's impossible. We can't fly. To be perfect is impossible. Not even the Buddha is perfect. Because the Buddha can't do everything. And if there's God, not even God is perfect. He can't remove my anger. Right? I'm sure God wouldn't want me to be angry. But not even God. I mean, if you think about it, because if God doesn't want me to be angry, I'm sure He could remove it, but He can't remove my anger. So nothing can be perfect, but we try to be perfect. Look at the pressure we put on ourselves. And that's like commercials, etc. The perfect body. What's the perfect body? It's a Photoshop body of a person who would die if they had that body. Right? Right? Barbie would be dead if she was alive. I mean, Barbie could never, but we have the sense that's a perfect body. Again, it's just labeled on the basis of invitation that's not even realistic. But we try. So the thing is, just in that context, so we live in the century where we want to be perfect, etc. All right. And then we do an action, we do a negative action, and we feel guilty. That is extreme. How do we come from the extreme guilt? Where's the positive counterforce? It's regret. Okay? Regret as in like, oh, I couldn't do it. What a shame. If I had the ability to do it, I just didn't do it, I go, well, next time I try harder. So I differentiate between me and the imputed I, which is much more, refers to mind and body, and a certain action I did at a certain time. Okay, yesterday I failed to help an elderly lady to cross the street. I could have done it. I was just lazy, right? I was just preoccupied. I couldn't be bothered. I didn't do it. Okay. So then the healthy thing to do would be, well, I'm not perfect. I cannot be. But I made a mistake. It was a negative. I could have done it. I didn't do it. It was wrong. Next time I'll try better. That's regret. That's realistic. But I make a bit of guilt out of it. I see the action and myself as one. I'm a failure. Plus, yesterday's failure is still today's failure. Actually, yesterday is long gone, Not helping the elderly lady over the street. It's done. It's gone. She's back home. Okay? She's home now. It's not like I'm not helping her over the street right now. It's gone now. It's done. So it feels as if the action was still there. It feels I'm one with this, and I'm bad, therefore. That's totally exaggerated. Gosh, and then if I don't help her yesterday, and I didn't do this yesterday, oh my God, the package we carry with us. All these actions we see as one with ourselves and we beat ourselves up. There's nothing there in reality that supports that. It doesn't make any sense, it just makes us miserable. Does that make sense? Right? So, therefore, it's an exaggerated emotion. It's totally exaggerated by us adding more and more what we needed to add. I am just labeled on the action. My mind and body didn't do this in that moment. My mind and body is changing. They're changing all the time. So basically, it's different in each day. But I very conveniently, or my mind kind of like, I'm frozen in time, my failure to help that woman over cross the street. Sometimes it's like doing something, and sometimes it's failing to do something. We label that, and it's just labeled as such. It is changing all the time, there's new things I do, but I'm stuck with it. I only see this, right? I only see, and me becomes that. That's guilt then. Painful, unnecessary, it's an affliction. It's just something that makes us suffer. So therefore, not understanding that those are just conceptions. Those are concepts we label. Of course, not just anything. We don't call a cow a car, and a car a house, or whatever. No, there's a basis of imputation, but nonetheless it's relative. And we add more to it, and we add so much suffering. So, with the anger previously, holding a grudge is another example where not only do we see the person and their action as one, we see the person as permanent. Yesterday's person harmed me, but I still hate them today because they're the same. They're one. Last year they harmed me, that's the same guy, I don't like them. So not only do we add, we also make things frozen in time. They kind of become frozen. I failed last year, I'm a bad person still, although I totally changed in the meantime. Okay? So there you have guilt, which is a time of self-hatred. Okay? Guilt is a kind of, because we feel bad about ourselves, we don't like ourselves, we feel bad, right? So guilt and self-hatred or self-loathing are very, very close. And then there's anger and resentment. They're also very close. Not liking something. Okay. What about envy? Envy. Okay, so it's another one. Center of the self. Okay, competitiveness, important. Some competitiveness is the healthy. There's a competitiveness that is healthy. Right? Comparing ourselves with others in the sense that, and the best type is to compare what we could do yesterday or before to what we can do today. Right? So yesterday, when I was little, I couldn't read and write. Now I can read and write. That's, I think modern psychology calls that task-oriented. I listened to a radio program where they interviewed a psychologist who spoke about there's task-oriented and there's ego-oriented. So task-oriented is the good one. Task in the sense like I compare myself with what I did yesterday, I'm better today at this. Of course the mind, the brain, because of neuroplasticity, the brain is malleable, it can be changed. And what we could not do yesterday, we can learn to do today. Okay? Through meditation. Meditation, of course, is that which utilizes neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to change. And so, but there's this, so with regard to,
task creation and
yes,
ego.
yes. So with regard to comparing ourselves to others, so my task, the things I could do previously, now I compare it to what I could do before, and even compare myself with others. That's fine. Oh, this person is very hard at reading a book, or they work very hard at doing this work, etc. Oh, I could work harder, right? I could make more of an effort. Of course, I can only do this much. They can do more. Okay, I'm good at other things. Never mind. But this is a healthy. So comparing myself just to see, could I push myself a little further? Is there room for improvement? That's realistic. But no, we don't do that. We engage in ego-oriented. Like, I need to be better. So it goes to such a degree that this is the extreme case, where we don't like the other person to have a certain success or have a certain attribute or have a certain whatever. We don't like them to have it, but we want to have it ourselves. So it goes to the degree where we resent the other person for having that, and we crave it ourselves. Right? So it's an exaggeration here again. It's an exaggeration. Also, on top of it, we forget we have so many other abilities. We focus in on one thing, and we feel deprived. We feel we don't have this, though we have so much else. Right? We don't focus so much on what we don't, on what we have. We focus much more on what we don't have. We compare ourselves with others. So that's where it's exaggerated, and that's where dissatisfaction arises. And that's why people in the West are much more dissatisfied, where we have a lot more, than in countries where people have much less. Because this drives our society. We have the opportunity to watch commercials, right? People in certain countries, they don't have that same access. So no one is telling them, you're missing this, you have to get Coke because otherwise you're not complete. You have to get this car. There is a sense you're incomplete if you don't have those phenomena. And we're very much influenced by that. We're not aware, we're not able to filter. You know, like these websites where you can filter things out? Our mind, unfortunately, is not necessarily able to filter. And to tell you the truth, I think advertisement is very, very impressive. It's very sophisticated. The psychological messages, the subliminal message, which is often sexual, we don't even notice. Did you ever know in the Camel logo there was a naked man in the Camel logo? Well, Google it, you'll find there's a naked guy there. And there's certain sweets. There's one commercial, they've changed this now. There are certain letters, they read sex, right? It's actually a child's...
Skittle?
Pardon?
Skittle?
I think it's Skittle, yeah. So it reads sex if you read it quickly. And there's a very old commercial of a woman, you know, kind of going like this. If you turn it around, it's like a woman touching herself. So it's like, it's all subliminal. So this is the sexual message. Because of course, because of the innate sexual drive, you know, it creates some excitement in us when it's subliminally. But that's just subliminal. That is not that obvious. But there's the other messages that are not that subliminal. They're not that subtle, more obvious, and still we don't think about them. For instance, that this makes us happy. That happiness can be bought. Okay? There are these logos. Drive happiness. Volkswagen had a commercial. It's drive happiness. Or Coke has a commercial. Open happiness. So a sense that these objects can give you happiness, and the sense that if you don't have it, that you need to be dissatisfied. So this is where our sense of dissatisfaction comes from, because we always focus on the not have and forget the have. This is also where unhappiness comes from. This is a very, very interesting phenomenon that oftentimes, in Israel, for instance, right? A lot of people, when I ask them, are you happy? They say, no, I'm not really happy because we have this problem, this problem, this problem. But the thing is, you have this problem, but it's just labeled, and we have a sense, you have to be unhappy because of this problem. But when I spend time with them, I find they're actually quite happy. And there's a psychologist, a Canadian psychologist called Keith Oatley. He did an experiment with people. He asked them to keep a diary of their happiness. And the way they described their lives, they said it was very unhappy. Because what they labeled to be happiness was being with friends, having a pay rise, having a new car, etc. And that doesn't happen every day. So the sum of their happiness, they thought they were really unhappy when they looked at their own life. But then the same Canadian psychologist, he gave them a pager. And he would, in moments, just randomly throughout the day, he would ask them, how do you feel? And they say, I'm happy. Why? Because there was no problem in that moment. There was no disease. They appreciated that maybe they had a toothache yesterday and today it was gone. But we don't say no toothache is happiness. Only if a second before you had strong toothaches, then when it's gone, you appreciate for a moment you don't have it. But then we just take it for granted. We forget, right? And then there's a sense when problems arise, oh, this is difficult, this is a problem. So we create a lot of our own unhappiness by saying this and this and this and this I don't have, and therefore I'm unhappy. But actually, there's so much we have in our lives. There's so much, only when we don't have it, we suddenly realize. So I give this example of a hot shower, oftentimes. A hot shower. We can have a hot shower whenever we want, and possibly as long as we want. Big deal. Well, there's a Tibetan lady, you should read her book. Her book is called Ama Ade. She was imprisoned by the Chinese for 25 years. She didn't change her clothes, and she didn't have a shower for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
For 15 years. And I can have a shower. I can have a shower. That is so amazing. So oftentimes we forget those little things. I can get up in the morning, basically when I want. I'm not in prison, where they tell me when I have to get up, when I go to bed, when I can have a shower, when I can exercise, when I do this, that, and the other. We never think about this. We think of the things we don't have. And in the West, because of modern advertisement, people, they make us feel all the time, you're not having this, you don't have a BMW, you don't have So we're influenced by that. We rob ourselves of happiness because we don't spend enough time to think what we all have, right? Yeah, we can think, right? I mean, there are people who can't think, right? We can eat. We can learn things. You know, we have this ability to learn. There's so much we can do. We live in a country where we have relative freedom. Okay, there are problems, but again, also the problems that are there make this country so special. My favorite students, Western students, are Israelis, because there are enough problems in the country that make people so realistic, that make them open to new ideas, that make them open to the Dharma, make them open to making change. In Germany, people are comfortable. They got their iPhone, iPad, this, and every now and then they can, buy a new whatever. And they feel like, I don't need the Dharma. I'm happy right now. Why should I, right? So no wish to change their mind, no wish to grow. All the problems that Jewish people have gone through, they made Jewish people so creative. Because you had to live in countries where there was, all the terrible things that happened. On the other side, look at this country, waves, what's up? All these desalination, all these ideas that come from Israel, if you check, because people are very creative. So despite all these problems, there are all these amazing things. But oftentimes people feel, the country is so difficult, it's so difficult. But it brings out a lot of good things in people. Right? So we rob ourselves of our happiness because we don't understand. Things are just labeled. It's just imputed. From that basis, it's negative. But from another perspective, it's positive. Right? From one perspective, yes, my life is not happy. I'm labeling not happy because I don't have an iPad. But on that perspective, I'm happy because I don't have a toothache. Right? So happiness is just labeled on the basis of this, that, and the other. It's up to me to look around and count all the good things in my life. Right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So we just focus in on one thing. I say, right, one thing with the eye, with the conceptions, with the what do you call it? With the guilt and so forth. We only ever zoom in one thing. We label, and then we think that's it, in and of itself. We don't see the whole picture any longer. Okay? So labeling is important, of course. It is important to label, but let's not forget. Let's not forget that that's what we're doing. Our mind does that. And in and of itself, nothing can be found. You don't find anything that's absolute this or that. So it's totally up to us. There's so much freedom in our lives to find happiness, basically. So much freedom, right? And when I said initially, so how does this take place there for how do we label? So it's basically just that process. We see a base of imputation, and then based on what we've learned, we then say table, chair, etc. We say positive, negative, happiness, suffering, and so forth. And that's what the mind does. And then it adds more to it. It adds more. There's a sense it's in and of itself like that. It is unchanging. And depending on the emotional response, it becomes so big, we often don't see the whole picture. We just zoom into one thing and we forget the whole picture. And then we believe this is objective reality. It feels as if this is objective. This is not just us creating. So it's not that our mind perceives reality, our mind creates reality. This is an Israeli who said that to me. This is an Israeli. It's one of my drives from one retreat to the other. Oftentimes I'm with people and this shows our incredible wisdom. Each one of us has this incredible wisdom. It's just kind of, we add all this balagan, all this stuff, all these conceptions that sometimes it pops up and these most amazing things pop up, which we talk about Buddha nature, with this wisdom we hold inside of us. And every now and then it pops up. And then all this stuff comes on top of it and we are unhappy and, things go wrong. And then it comes up again. And this is what's so beautiful, because when I'm in Israel, we have these drives back and forth. And what I like so much about Israeli, Alon and I were talking about it. Whenever in Israel I meet someone, I get into their car, we start talking, and I know them for 10 years. Oh, my whole life. It feels like I've known them my whole life. We talk like we were like old brothers, sisters. It's always like that. I came with you, with Itai. I heard so much about him. I know so much about him. And I learned so much, new stuff today. So, therefore, and then these people have these ideas. So, once I had this drive with the person, I forget the name now. Then someone said, consciousness doesn't perceive reality, but creates reality. I wrote it down. I have like a notebook for special quotes that people make. It's beautiful. So it came from one Israeli, I forget who it was. Right? Okay. So all these beautiful ideas that we actually have a sense of reality, but it's blocked. It's obstructed by that whole mess, by that whole mess we create. We forget that we're just labeling. We're just giving those terms, and they help us. They're beneficial. Let's not. What's the word? Let's not blame labeling for it, because it makes our life easier. It makes our life easier. However, it's all that adding, it's all that exaggerating that causes the problem. Forgetting that we've just labeled. We've just given that. We've just labeled I, we labeled other, we labeled positive, negative, happiness, and so forth. Okay? All right, so this feels kind of complete. I keep looking at this watch to make sure I don't keep you here until 11, because when I started, I can go for 3 hours and not feel late. But I also want to take some questions. I think it's important. There may have been things that you found difficult to accept, or questions that came up, comments that you have. So please feel free. We have about 25 minutes. Yes, please.
Can you repeat the Israeli quote?
The Israeli quote, okay. Yeah, I've tried to think who said it. It's not sure. I don't remember. Anyway, the quote was, we don't perceive reality, we create, consciousness. Our consciousness doesn't perceive reality, it creates reality. It was something like in the context of like, that just shows our mind doesn't perceive reality. It feels as if we're just perceiving what's there, right? Our mind is just a looking glass into the world. But actually our mind creates these things. Okay? So therefore, it says like our consciousness doesn't perceive reality, it creates it. Okay? All right. More questions? Yes, please?
From what you're saying there now, and you were talking about the table at the beginning, so you're saying that there is no table. Actually, there is. If you don't have.
If you don't label, there's no table.
There is no table.
No.
There is no forest. There is no world. There is no nothing.
No, only conventionally. Only as in like a labeled. Is there 200 shekel? No. There's only a conventional 200 shekel, a labeled conventional shekel.
But if there is no me, I'm not here.
Okay. The thing is, I didn't say you're not there. I didn't say the 200 shekel are not there. I'm saying a 200 shekel without the labeling, that is not there. So if you didn't have a labeling, then it wouldn't be there. But since there's a labeling, it is there. So you are there because there's someone labeling I, right? I'm labeling you. What's your name?
Ron.
Ron. I'm labeling Ron. We're labeling Ron. I'm labeling man, not just Ron, but also man, Israeli, etc. Other people do too. You do too. But if you didn't have that labeling, if there were no labeling, you wouldn't have Ron, you wouldn't have I, you wouldn't have Israeli. If no one labeled. So everything exists due to labeling. You're doing something very good. You're falling into the other extreme. We have two extremes. We experience two extremes usually. Either everything exists in and of itself. It's got nothing to do with what I call it. Things are absolutely like this, absolutely like that, right? Or we think there's nothing there. Those are the two extremes. So very nicely, you just went to the other extreme. This is why we call this explanation the middle way. The middle between that extreme and the other extreme. So now the art is to go from one to the other and slowly find the middle. Where we don't say nothing is there, where we don't say everything is there absolutely, but we find the middle. So you've just gone in that direction, which is a good sign. But it's too far. It's too far. You're there. But if you were to take away labeling, and you just need to look for it. Do you find a table here? Except for having a concept table. And it doesn't necessarily mean shulcha or table or tish in German or whatever, jokse in Tibetan or Chinese, they also use the same word. It doesn't mean the word, it means also the idea we have of table. Because even before, there's something a little bit more complicated. I'm glad you asked me this question because I remember to now mention it. There's actually something we call a mental image or a sound, like it's called like a general meaning generality and a sound generality. Those are the technical terms. The technical terms are a little difficult, but the idea is simple. Take, for instance, you've never seen the sea. You've never been to the sea. Now I describe to you the sea, okay? So in your mind, you hear the word sea, you hear the word sea. So you have a general sense of the sea, right? You have a sense of that. The word means something to you, but you don't really know what it refers to. So you have a sense of the word sea, okay? Then there's another person who's never heard that word, but they have perceived the sea. And they have their own kind of like, let's say an animal that doesn't know language, their own idea of sea. As humans, usually those two come together. What we mean the sea to mean, what the sea means to us, plus the word sea, they become mixed. The meaning generality and the sound generality become mixed. So what we associate with the sea and what the name sea, we mix those. So every time I'm thinking about sea, then these two arise. So there's the name plus my association with sea. So this is my own individual, that's what I perceive the sea to be. And the claim goes so far that if I didn't have a concept of the sea, I couldn't even perceive it. So an example for that is, for instance, when Christopher Columbus came to America, the American Indians, as they're called now, I mean the actual Americans, when they were standing at the shore, many of them didn't see the boats because they had no concept of a boat. They just didn't see it. So some saw some dark cloud. They thought they were dark clouds, so they associated. But you have no association with it. Right? And we just think it's really there, so everyone must see it. But here it shows that unless you have an association with it, any sense, like it's a shape, it's different from that shape, unless you have a sense of that, you can't see it. Right? But therefore, because we have associations, because we have language, because we have concepts, we see everything we see around us.
It's like the story with the elephant and the blinds.
Can you explain this? Can you tell the story?
There's a story in the Indian tradition that the king with the blinds put them near an elephant.
Yes.
And everyone touched another part of the elephant because they didn't see what is the elephant.
Yes.
He thinks the ear is the elephant. and another one is
Yes.
the leg. Is
Yes,
out.
yes, 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 yes.
It's
Yes.
a famous story.
It's a famous story. Now that you're saying, I know the story differently, that they all look from different sides. The elephant is so big, so everyone sees a different part or feels a different part. Yeah, so it's very similar. Actually, this is very similar. Like, we have ideas of object. We never see the whole thing, but we see parts of it, and this is the idea of the object. This is our individual idea, right? So therefore, this is our world. These are our ideas of things. We never see the whole thing. A Buddha would be someone who sees everything, who sees our thoughts that we have and perceives that they're, without the thoughts, without those constructs, there wouldn't be anything there. I mean, this is the most difficult topic in Buddhism, to tell you the truth. So if you find it difficult, don't be surprised, of course. Yes.
You make it simple.
Yeah, make it simple, yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah, you spoke about the me in the center and the generation that focus to be different, to think different,
Mm-hmm.
and in your answer to the other friends that think about the middle way,
Mm-hmm.
and I have thought, where's the middle way of thinking or behaving or practicing?
That's an important question. How is it practical? How does it become? Because that's most important. Who cares where the middle is, right? If we don't apply it in our whole lives, right? So right now, our problem is to exaggerate. So there are two ways to go about it. Two ways to actually practice the middle, if you like. One way is to deal with empty, like think about emptiness, think about selfless, think about this idea we described today until we understand it. We understand this is how phenomena exist, so we naturally don't act in such an extreme way, because now we know it doesn't exist that way. We know firsthand, we have an understanding of that, right? We don't just believe it, but it's through our own experience. Our mind experiences it fully. Yeah, I still haven't addressed that point about knowing and stuff, I just remember. But anyway, so you come to a conclusion with regard to the middle, you know it, and then you act out of it. Okay? That's one solution. But that takes a lot of time. And in the meantime, there's other things we can do. So addressing what I just described is addressing the root misperception. The misperception that exaggerate with regard to everything. Everything seems to exist in and of itself, objectively, intrinsically. So if you understand how phenomena really exist, that absence of phenomena existing in such a way, and that they're just labeled, just designated by our mind, if you understand that, you understand the main culprit that is responsible for our other emotions that are destructive, and then they can no longer arise. It's similar to the example they sometimes give, our sense that phenomena exist objectively, inherently, like in and of themselves, nothing to do with us just calling them that. That is similar to perceiving a monster in a closet. You perceive a monster in the closet, and out of that fear arises, out of that all sorts of emotions arise. So I can deal with each emotion separately, temporarily, or I can open the closet and check. So what I described now was like, let's check, do phenomena really exist the way they appear? As if Obama was the president from his own side. As if bad was really ultimately bad. There's good and bad, there's evil and so forth. Or is it just labeled relative to something else? If we come to really understand that, then it's impossible to have anger. It's impossible to exaggerate. We see it as just labeled, and love and compassion will grow instead. There's space for wishing others to have happiness, being in a conventional sense. Nonetheless, it's not absolute, but people still suffer, people still have problems, and on the basis of that, I wish them to be happy, etc. I be generous. There's nothing to hold back to. Money can't really give me the happiness that I believe it can give me, and so forth. But there's something, but until we understand that, which is so difficult, we can deal with the different emotions individually. Okay? I deal with anger, for instance. Okay? Understand that anger has a lot of disadvantages. Bottling up is not the solution, of course. Keeping it inside is not a solution. make sure that it doesn't arise in the first place. Train our mind, generating love towards the other person, generating patience with regard to a situation, so that these extreme minds don't arise in our continuum. We try to lessen them as much as we can, so we can individually deal with them. Okay? Anger, like by generating patience and love. I haven't mentioned attachment yet. You know, when we're attached to something, there's a feeling, I can't live without this object. We only see the positive aspect of the object. And then I want it, you know, I want to be around it. I feel like I can't be without it, etc. So that's attachment. So in that moment, we reflect upon the impermanence of the object. It's constantly changing. It's not giving me happiness forever. After some time anyway, if I'm always around the object, you know, at some point I get bored of it. So the kind of happiness that I feel it can give me right now, if I'm always around the object, well, it can't really give it to me, right? So that's one with regard to attachment. I can take envy and jealousy and rejoice in others' happiness and rejoice in others' success. Just train myself to rejoice in other people's happiness. Why not? Right? I mean, I'm happy for my own success. I'm happy for my children's success. As another person who's successful, well, why not be happy for other people, for everyone's success? Even if I'm jealous, it doesn't make it my success anyway. It doesn't get me closer to getting it. Might as well be happy for them. Then I have much more joy in this world, because my success is only one person's success. If I'm happy for other people's success, I'm a much happier person. It's a win-win situation. Right? So I can deal with these, and it makes sense to be happy for other people's success, doesn't it? It doesn't make sense to be jealous, actually. Just make myself miserable, and I'm paralyzed. I really don't get it. I'm not relaxed enough to actually get it. So just be happy for the other person. So those are just temporary. It's a temporary relief that is helpful. Right? It's helpful. It makes us happier in the process. And it calms our mind because of the degree of satisfaction and contentment that arises. It opens our mind to a deeper understanding. The more angry we are, the less we see reality. The more attached we are, the more self-obsessed we are, the less we can see things for what they are. It's almost like a blinder. Isn't that what you called it? Like what horses have, like a blinder? Yeah. So the more I see I, the less I see others. So it helps us to be more loving, to be more kind, to open up our wisdom, and then we can get closer to understanding how phenomena really exist. So actually there are no evil people. This is something my brother once said. My brother is not a Buddhist. My brother doesn't like Buddhism. If I say Buddha, he rolls his eyes. He walks away. I cannot use any word that's just, meditation is already too much. So he's really not into anything. But he once said this was also something that just broke out of him after he analyzed the situation. Some woman had given him a lot of grief. Anyway, and so had given him a lot of grief, and it was really more her fault. I mean, it was not just subjectively, but there was a lot of insecurity, etc. And he said in the end, his conclusion was, it shows there are no evil people, they're just stupid people. I was like, whoa, it's so profound if you knew. So it's really just saying we just don't know how phenomena really exist. Stupid not in a judgmental sense, but we don't perceive phenomena correctly, and then we do these crazy, terrible things. But there's no one really evil. What is inside us is that, that this extreme way of seeing things, not seeing things as they really are. And that turns us into, relative evil people, like doing evil things, if you like. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Anything more? Anything more? Yeah, go ahead, sure. Nice one.
I'm wondering about teaching kids, my kids, not to think only about themselves. You're saying that the perspective,
Perspective.
of I
Yeah.
is not good.
Yeah.
You're saying it's not good to good and bad is judgmental, so no. But we're saying that we don't want to think of us as I. We want to think of us as part of.
Yes.
But on the other hand, we need to teach our kids to think about themselves. So over here, how can we do it different with our kids?
The thing is, like, don't think that you're not I and others are not, others. This is not what we're saying, right? I mean, they should still be taught that, you should work hard and you should, give your very best, etc. Of course, also for the benefit of others. So I think what's very beautiful is to teach them the idea of interdependence, right? We're all part of one big world, basically. And also teach them the fact that everything good in our lives is because of others. Now, I hear people say, why should I be generous? Why should I give to others? Right? Why should I give to others? I worked hard for my money. Okay? But wait a minute, who made that money? Who created the money that you can use now? Who created the job that we can use now? Who created who's the one who buys things that help you to keep your job? Without others, we couldn't work hard. We wouldn't have the money. And even if we had the money, if there was somehow magically money, we couldn't buy a house from it because there was no one to make a house. We couldn't buy a plate of hummus because how many people are involved in the process of creating a plate of hummus, right? So all the good things in our life, our cars, everything good in our lives is because of others. So many people were involved in this. Just the moment when we were born, I mean, look at babies. They do this funny thing like, initially, right? I just watched a baby the other day. They can't even coordinate their motor. I mean, they're still kind of wobbly, kind of weird, kind of like, not weird. I mean, not judgmental here, but you can in a way like, whoops, what are they doing? And they learn by watching their parents, right? How to move. If they're on their mom's or their dad's back, they learn the movement, how to walk, okay? So their parents, so we learn so much from our parents. From the age of, I don't know what, until 5, it was just our parents, before we went to kindergarten and school. So our parents taught us so much, so much. And then all these people who fed our parents and clothed our parents and who taught our parents, right? So many people. So the things we take for granted, we may even feel arrogant about. So many people were involved in that. We couldn't even say shalom. We couldn't even write our name if it wasn't for so many people. So to teach them, look, everything good in our lives is because of others. Everything starts with our parents. Okay? I'm saying usually, we took the idea of Freud to an extreme. Again, another extreme. We focus on just the negative. I have a problem. My parents did this. I have a problem with my parents. Yes, that's true. I may have a problem because my parents made a mistake. That's like maybe 5 things. But there's thousands of things that they've done right. Because I can walk properly. You should just watch a movie on a documentary on feral children. Children who were raised in the wild or in a room in a terrible condition where no one ever taught them during the most important years in their life to walk, talk, and eat. They never learn it. Never properly. They never learn to properly relate to other people, right? They never learn. So we had parents who are loving, who made the most of our potential, right? The most of our potential. Our parents did so much for us. It's unbelievable. The fact that our mothers carried us for 9 months. I don't want to carry this for 1 day, says the nun. I mean, it's amazing, right? The sickness, the disease, all that our parents go through. So the good things of our parents, for us to appreciate that, right? The good things they do for us, everything, and everyone else involved in keeping our parents alive, in feeding our parents, in helping. And so I think this is really important. And I'm saying and giving you so much detail because just thinking about it once, about superficially, will not give you a real appreciation for everyone. You need to take it in all the details. Who gives us our video games? Who gives us our... So many people. We need to give something back. We have a responsibility, right? People say, I love my country. right? Israelis, I meet people, I love my country. We should love the people inside the country. How many people are poor? How many people are under the poverty line? I talked to a friend of mine, Nif Agam. He's got this project called Social Magic. Just translate that into Hebrew. Social magic. Kasem.
קסם חברתי.
Yes, so.
זה ערבות חברתית.
Yeah. So he told me that every fourth Israeli lives below the poverty line. Well, we live in this country. We love this country. We need to help these people. We need to help. They're part of us. We are part of them. They're part of us. We have this responsibility. So in that way, we have this beautiful body and mind. We can do so much. Especially we have this mind. And we have a relative comfort. There's things we can do. We can do more than we do. Let's do it. Let's see what we can do. And Israelis have proven this incredible creativity. They've proven this incredible creativity, so we can do more even than that. Right? So this I think we can teach our children. Emptiness, well, let's leave it for the time being. I mean, maybe a little overwhelming, but just wow. And there's so much wonderful in our life and so many people, and really make them look at the bully. And also what's really important, to generate more love and compassion. For instance, there may be people we don't like. There's people who do things, but let's look at the causes and conditions that made them who they are. How do we know we would not be like that if we had experienced the same causes and conditions? I cannot guarantee. Like, for me, a good example is, of course, an extreme example. We usually take extreme examples to help us understand other examples. So a serial killer, for instance. Like, I don't know, I hear about a serial killer. What's the word for serial killer in Hebrew?
רוצח סדרתי.
Yeah. So a serial killer, it's terrible, it's horrible. Like, I hate this person. It's like hatred right away, right? I hate this. And then all I need to hear is like, they were born into a family where the father's alcoholic, mother's alcoholic, they were beaten since they were small, they were raped, and suddenly my heart softens. But suddenly causes and conditions, and my judgment of like, they're bad and I know no, wait a minute. If I had been born, who can guarantee me I would not have been like that? I've been born in circumstances, I've been lucky. I had parents who taught me right from wrong. I've been lucky. I had friends who've taught me. I've been fortunate. It could have been so different. Now I have a responsibility. I have a responsibility to do something, to utilize this mind and body. Let's not just waste it, eating foods that are not good for me and just enjoying. Enjoyment is very brief, right? One day, a few hours. But if I do something for others, it can have that ripple effect of like helping a lot of people. Even if I'm just an example for others, inspiring others to do the same thing. And of course, that's the way your main responsibility is to live what you teach. You have to first be an example to live. Don't speak about it unless you do it. You do it first, try as hard as you can, and then mom would say, look at daddy. You should be like daddy. And then mom explains, or mom does it, and then daddy explains. Or you explain yourself, look, can you say it? It's not arrogant. It's like, look what I do. I do this because da-da-da-da-da. And then they go on. Right? So much we can do with our children.